It was the first morning of spring when Mei Lin arrived in Qingshan, a misty village nestled in the mountains of Sichuan. The bus dropped her off near a small tea house, and the scent of jasmine floated through the cool air. She clutched her suitcase tightly, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be her first year teaching full-time, and she had been assigned to the only primary school in the area. The school was an aging two-story building with cracked walls and faded red banners hanging above the entrance. Children chased each other in the courtyard, their laughter echoing through the hills. As Mei Lin walked toward the staff office, she couldn't help but notice how thin many of the students looked. Their uniforms were clean but worn, and their shoes had seen too many seasons. The headmaster, Mr. Chen, greeted her with a warm yet hurried smile. He was a tall man with silver hair and tired eyes. "Miss May, we're grateful to have you here. The children need consistency, especially after what happened last winter," he said, then quickly changed the subject before she could ask more. He handed her a stack of papers, a classroom key, and pointed her to the second floor. "Class 3. Most of them are eager to learn. 1 or 2 might need more patience." Her classroom was modest, with wooden desks, an old chalkboard, and faded posters of Chinese characters and multiplication tables. She began writing her name on the board when she felt eyes watching her. A boy stood at the door, silent. His uniform was buttoned to the top, but one sleeve was torn. His hair was unevenly cut, and his expression was blank. "And how?" she said gently. "What's your name?" The boy didn't speak. He simply walked to his seat at the back and sat down, eyes fixed on the desk. Later, she asked another student about him. "That's Xiaobo," the girl whispered. "He doesn't talk. Not since his mother left. He lives with his uncle." Mei Lin felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about Xiaobo that unsettled her, though she couldn't explain why. That night, in her tiny teacher's dorm room behind the school, Mei Lin thought about the boy with the blank eyes. Outside, the mountain wind howled against the windows. She told herself it was only nerves. But deep down, something told her that Qingshan held more secrets than anyone was willing to say. The days in Qingshan passed quietly, but not without unease. Mei Lin tried to settle into her new routine, teaching mathematics in the morning, reading aloud in the afternoon, and spending her evenings correcting exercise books by the dim light of her desk lamp. Yet her thoughts kept returning to Xiaobo. He rarely spoke. He never smiled. And while the other children played and chatted, he sat alone, drawing strange shapes on the corner of his notebook or staring at the window as though waiting for something or someone. One afternoon, after class had ended, Mei Lin stayed behind to tidy the room. That was when she noticed a piece of paper left behind on Xiaobo's desk. It was folded several times, almost obsessively. Inside was a drawing. A house, crudely sketched. Flames engulfed its roof. And beside it, a stick figure with a red scribble for a face. She felt her skin prickle. That night, she asked Mr. Chen if he knew anything more about Xiaobo's family. The headmaster hesitated. Then, after glancing at the window, he lowered his voice. "His mother vanished last year. People say she left Qingshan in the middle of the night, but some think otherwise. There were sounds, fights. One night, the neighbors saw smoke, but no fire was ever reported." "And his uncle?" Mei Lin asked. Mr. Chen's lips tightened. "Jiang Yao lives up the path past the bamboo grove. Keeps to himself. Comes to collect Xiaobo when school ends. Nobody really talks to him." The next day, Mei Lin decided to walk Xiaobo to the gate after school. The boy didn't protest. They passed other children waving goodbye, teachers locking their offices, and made their way to the road leading into the forested slope. Then she saw him. A man, tall and gaunt, stood waiting under a crooked tree. His eyes were narrow, his clothes too large for his frame. As soon as he saw Mei Lin, his lips twitched into a smile that never reached his eyes. "You must be Teacher Mei," he said. His voice was too smooth. "I hope my nephew is behaving." Xiaobo didn't say a word. He walked toward the man without looking back. Mei Lin watched them go, a sense of dread spreading in her chest like dark ink in water. That night, The wind returned, louder, colder. Maylin couldn't sleep. The image of the burning house stayed in her mind, and with it, the boy who never spoke and the uncle who smiled too much. She rose, stepped to her window, and stared out into the dark woods beyond the school fence. Somewhere beyond those trees, she knew, was a truth no one dared to speak aloud. And she was starting to fear it. The morning fog in Qingshan seemed thicker than usual. Maylin wrapped her scarf tightly as she crossed the courtyard, the sound of her boots muffled by the damp earth. She kept glancing towards the path that led into the woods. There was no sign of Xiaobo. He did not come to school that day. By afternoon, whispers had already begun circulating among the students. Children are cruel in their own curious ways. Some said Xiaobo had been taken by ghosts. Others claimed his pawman had dragged him away screaming in the middle of the night. Maylin silenced them with a sharp look, but inside, she was deeply worried. She found herself outside Mr. Chen's office, knocking before she realized what she would even say. "I noticed Xiaobo was absent," she began. Mr. Chen sighed, rubbing his temples. "Zhang Yao came by this morning. Said the boy was unwell. Nothing more." Maylin nodded but felt no relief. That night, she could not sleep again. The wind had stilled, but something else lingered, a feeling like eyes watching her from the dark corners of the room. She sat at her desk, attempting to mark homework, when she heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was faint at first, coming from beneath the floorboards. She froze. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate. Her breath caught in her throat. She forced herself to her feet, stepped silently to the center of the room, and crouched. Nothing. She tapped on the wood. Silence. Then, 3 knocks. From underneath. Maylin leapt back, heart racing. She grabbed her torch and shone it at the floor, trembling as the light flickered. After a long moment, the noise stopped completely. Only the sound of the trees shifting outside remained. She did not sleep at all that night. The next day, Xiaobo returned. He looked even thinner, paler. He moved mechanically, like a puppet. His eyes avoided hers. During reading time, Maylin watched him from her desk. He was not reading. He was sketching again. After class, she quietly took the paper he left behind. This time, it was not a burning house. It was a hand. Long fingers. Sharp nails. Reaching up from beneath the floorboards. The week passed in a blur of unease. Maylin found herself second-guessing every creak of wood, every gust of wind against the classroom windows. Xiaobo remained withdrawn, barely speaking. He flinched at sudden movements and refused to go near the back of the classroom, where the shadows clung longest. One afternoon, just as the last bell rang, she noticed that Xiaobo was missing again. She called his name, but none of the students had seen him leave. Her heart raced. She searched the corridors, the toilets, the empty classrooms. Nothing. Something told her to check the old storage shed behind the school. It was a weathered structure, forgotten by most, its lock rusted and door perpetually ajar. It was where the school stored broken desks and unused supplies. As she approached, she heard it. A cry. Faint. Childlike. Muffled. "Xiaobo," she called out. No answer. She pushed the door slowly. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside, dust danced in the streaks of light breaking through the cracks in the wooden walls. The air smelled of mold and rust. Then, from behind a stack of chairs, she heard a soft whimper. She hurried over and found Xiaobo curled up, clutching a sketchbook like a shield. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently, kneeling beside him. He shook his head, eyes wide with terror. "It's under the school," he whispered. "It comes at night. I hear it breathing." Maylin felt a chill snake down her spine. "It comes from the floor. It wants someone." She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. "Who told you this?" she asked. He looked at her then, truly looked at her for the first time. "It showed me." Later that evening, after safely returning Xiaobo home, Maylin walked back to the school, unable to let it rest. She entered the classroom, turned off the lights, and sat quietly at her desk. Nothing happened. until the silence itself began to press against her skin, as though the air had grown heavier. Then came a low creaking beneath her feet, and a sound that was not quite human. A breath. Wet. Labored. She stood. But she did not run. Instead, she whispered into the darkness. "What do you want?" There was no reply. Only another breath. And then a soft tapping. The following morning, the sky over Qingshan hung low and gray, as if the village itself were holding its breath. Meilin stood in front of her class, but her thoughts drifted constantly to the floor beneath her feet. She could no longer pretend this was merely in her head. At break time, she approached Mr. Chen. "I need to see the blueprints of a school," she said calmly. He frowned. "Why?" "Because something is living under it." His eyes narrowed, a mix of concern and disbelief. "That's a strong accusation, Miss May." "I'm not accusing. I'm trying to understand." "Please." To her surprise, he gave a tired nod. By that afternoon, she was poring over the old documents in the office storeroom. The blueprints were faded, drawn by hand decades ago. She traced her finger across the main building, her eyes catching something strange, an old cellar entrance marked beneath the classroom. It had been sealed off 20 years ago. That evening, torch in hand, Meilin returned. She found the loose board under the teacher's desk. With effort, she pried it up, revealing a small, square opening just large enough to crawl through. Cold air rushed up from below. The scent of earth and rot filled her nostrils. She hesitated. Then she climbed down. The crawl space was narrow, the soil damp beneath her palms. She moved slowly, her torch casting flickering shadows on the dirt walls. Every sound echoed, her breath, her movements, the occasional shift of unseen things. Then she saw it. A tunnel, roughly dug, winding deeper into the earth. Scratches lined the walls, as though something had clawed its way through the soil. The further she went, the more intense the smell became. Something animal. Or worse. She turned a corner and found a pile of objects. Toys. Shoes. A rusted lunchbox. All things that once belonged to children. Meilin covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She stepped closer, torch trembling in her grip, when she heard it again. Breathing. Just ahead. This time it was not faint. It was right there. She turned quickly to leave, but froze when she saw a shape in the distance. A figure. Not fully formed. Crawling. Its limbs too long. Its head lolling. Meilin scrambled back the way she came, heart thundering, torch flickering wildly as she scraped her knees and elbows in her rush. She reached the crawlspace opening and pulled herself up just as the figure reached the edge of the tunnel. It stopped and smiled. The next day, Meilin sat in silence across from Mr. Chun in his office. Her hands were scraped, her blouse torn at the hem, but her eyes held a clarity he had never seen before. "I found a tunnel," she said plainly, "and it is not empty." Mr. Chun looked at her, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn folder. He placed it in front of her. "You are not the first," he said softly. Inside were reports. Missing children. Names. Dates. All within the last 20 years. There had never been official investigations, only notes and hushed rumors among villagers. Meilin's heart sank as she recognized a pair of names, Xiaofun and Bo, the two children who had appeared in her classroom that first day. "They were never found, were they?" she asked. Mr. Chen shook his head. "No bodies. No explanations. We were told to forget." "By who?" He hesitated. "The headmaster at the time. And those above him. They said it was better for the village. That it was an old curse. Superstition." Meilin stood, her voice firm. "This is not superstition. There's something alive down there. Something feeding." Later that evening, she went to visit Mrs. Hua, the oldest resident in the village. The elderly woman welcomed her in, her eyes knowing before a word was spoken. "You have seen it," Mrs. Hua whispered. Meilin nodded. Mrs. Hua motioned to a cabinet. She opened it, revealing a collection of old drawings made by children. Shadows with red eyes, long limbs, and sharp fingers. All eerily similar. "It comes for the lonely ones," Mrs. Hua said. "The quiet ones. Those who slip through cracks. It speaks with voices they know. Promises them things." Mei Lin felt her skin crawl. Why hasn't anyone stopped it? Mrs. Hua's expression grew heavy. Because fear is stronger than truth in this village. That night, Mei Lin dreamt of the tunnel, of small hands reaching out, of laughter turning to screams. She awoke with a plan forming in her mind. She could no longer pretend this was just about her classroom, or even the school. It was about every child who had vanished without a trace. She was going to find out where the tunnel ended, even if it meant she might not return. Mei Lin waited until the school emptied. The sky outside was fading from gray to black as she slipped through the side entrance with a rucksack slung over her shoulder. Inside it, she had packed a flashlight, rope, extra batteries, a small first aid kit, and her grandmother's jade pendant. Not for luck, for courage. She made her way down the corridor and opened the storage room that led to the forgotten stairwell. The air grew colder with every step. Dust clung to the walls like ash, and the light from her torch trembled against the concrete. At the bottom of the stairwell, the tunnel yawned open, dark and still. She stepped inside. The damp earth crunched beneath her feet. Her breath echoed. She passed markings on the walls, scratches, crude symbols, even childish writing. One said, "I miss my mummy." Another simply read, "Stay away." But she went on. After several minutes, she came to a split. One tunnel sloped left, the other dipped steeply down. Mei Lin hesitated, then chose the downward path. It was narrower here, the walls brushing her shoulders. The smell hit her next, mold, rot, and something else. Something that reminded her of wet wool and burnt feathers. Suddenly, her torch flickered. She hit it, and it steadied. Then came the laughter. Children's laughter. Soft, distant, echoing off the stone. She froze. "Bo," she called out, though her voice shook. "Xiaofen." No reply, only the sound of something scraping. She pushed forward, the passageway twisting until it opened into a chamber carved from stone. In the center stood a makeshift shrine. Dolls with missing eyes. Shoes too small for adults. Drawings of a large figure surrounded by children with blank faces. There were candles, still burning. Her torch dimmed again, and then she saw them. Eyes. Dozens of tiny, glimmering eyes in the dark. Children. Or what used to be children. Their faces were pale, mouths slack. They didn't move. A shadow rose behind them. Tall, twisted, and smiling. Mei Lin backed away, her voice caught in her throat. The figure raised a long arm, and the children began to move, slowly, unnaturally, toward her. She turned and ran. The tunnel spun around her. The shadows chased her footsteps. Hands reached from the walls. Voices called her name. She stumbled, crawled, kept moving. She burst out of the tunnel and up the stairwell, slamming the door behind her. She was panting, soaked in sweat and tears. But she was alive. And she had seen what no one else would dare speak of. Mei Lin sat in the staff room the next morning, clutching a warm cup of tea that did little to stop her trembling. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she hadn't slept. The other teachers murmured about her appearance, but no one asked. Not yet. She waited for Headmaster Sun to arrive. When he finally walked in, she stood up immediately. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice tight. He studied her, expression unreadable, then nodded and gestured to his office. Inside, she told him everything about the tunnel, the shrine, the children, and the figure in the dark. Her words came fast, frantic, but clear. Headmaster Sun listened in silence. Then he locked the door. "Miss Mei Lin," he said slowly, "there are things in this village older than you or me. Things that demand respect and fear." She blinked. "You knew." He nodded, gravely. "That tunnel wasn't made for escape. It was made to keep something in. Centuries ago, during the Great Famine, villagers made sacrifices. They believed it kept the rest of us alive. Children were chosen. Always the weakest, the ones least likely to survive. Maylin felt her stomach turn. They created that place to hold the entity they called the Red Guardian. It fed on innocence, on fear. And it never left. She stared at him in disbelief. But the school, why build it here? Because they thought it would pacify it. Laughter. Learning. Children thriving. A distraction from hunger and sorrow. But it's not working. No, he admitted. It grows restless. Every few years it whispers. 1 or 2 children vanish. We make it stop. You let them vanish? He didn't answer. Just looked at her with tired, haunted eyes. I want to report this, she said, standing. You won't, he replied calmly. Because no one will believe you. Because the parents know. The village knows. They accept the cost. She was speechless. There are old truths, Miss Maylin. Some truths, if spoken aloud, become curses. She left the office shaking, the teacup still in her hand. That afternoon, she watched the children play under the gray sky, their laughter echoing across the courtyard. She saw Bo again, sitting alone beneath the ginkgo tree, his eyes darker than she remembered. And then she saw him smile, not the way a child smiles, but the way something ancient smiles through borrowed flesh. She dropped the cup. It shattered on the stones. She knew, in that instant, the warning had come too late. That night, Maylin could not sleep. The shadows in her small apartment seemed alive, flickering with whispered voices. She felt the weight of what she had uncovered pressing down on her. She knew she could not stay silent. The next day, she gathered her courage and went to the village elders. They sat in a circle, faces stern and unreadable. Maylin told them everything, the tunnel, the sacrifices, the Red Guardian. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Elder Zhang spoke. We have lived with this curse for generations, he said quietly. It is not easy to break what was bound by ancient fear. Maylin asked, but why keep it a secret? Why allow children to disappear? It is not a choice we want, Zhang replied. It is survival. The balance must be maintained. She pressed harder, but their faces remained hard. She realized the truth was a chain around the village, heavy and unyielding. Determined, Maylin went back to the school. She gathered the children, told them stories not of fear, but of courage and hope. She showed them the strength that lay in unity. Yet, deep inside, she knew the darkness was still there, waiting. One evening, as she walked home through the mist, she saw a small hand slip into hers. It was Bo. His eyes no longer held the shadow. For a moment, Maylin felt hope. But the night whispered that hope could be fragile. Days turned into weeks, and Maylin continued her work with the children, determined to protect them from the darkness lurking beneath their village. She introduced new games, songs, and stories, all designed to bring joy and courage to their young hearts. But the village remained silent, and the shadow loomed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Maylin noticed a change in Bo. He seemed restless, eyes darting towards the forest edge, as if hearing something no one else could. She followed him one night, through winding paths cloaked in mist, until they reached the old shrine near the tunnel's entrance. There, Bo stopped and looked back at her. You cannot stop it, he whispered, voice low and trembling. Maylin gripped his hand tighter. Together, we can. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying a faint, eerie melody. The Red Guardian was awakening. With a final glance at the frightened children waiting back at school, Maylin took a deep breath and stepped forward into the darkness, ready to face the haunting past and protect the future.